Hello everyone, I'm Sunil. I welcome you back to my YouTube channel Tech Basics. So I welcome you to the new playlist wherein I will introduce C++ and will try to understand C++ in detail. The basics of C++ first we'll try to understand and then we'll understand the language in detail. So, to start with, what exactly we mean by C++? Why is that we have to learn this particular language? How many such languages we have to learn? So, there are so many questions that you get when you talk about any particular language that you want to study. So, when you say C++, the name itself suggests it is something plus plus to a language called C. So we can also say C++ as a language called C with the concept of object-oriented programming system. C plus the concept of OOPS, you can call it as a C++. So C++ equals to, I can say C with the concept of OOPS. Now, who has developed this particular language, when it was developed, and so on? Let's try to go into the history of this particular language. C++ programming language has a history going back to 1979 when Jarne Stoustrup, a Danish computer scientist, has developed this particular language. He was working on his PhD thesis and he was working on a simulation project. While he was working with a language called Simula, he has designed this language and he has given the name for that particular language which is suitable for software development as C++. He is a visiting professor at Columbia University and works for Morgan Stanley as a managing director in New York. So Jarny Stoustrup is a person, a computer scientist who has designed this particular language in 1979. Now, a question that comes is, what is C++ used for? Why we have to learn this particular language? We can definitely call C++ as a middle level language. Now, a question that comes is, what exactly we mean by a middle level language? You have three different categories of languages. One is called a high level language, the other one you call it as middle level language, and the third one you call it as low level language. We know that our hardware, which is present in the system, understands only machine language. So, a language which is very near to it, which is machine friendly, which is written in abbreviations, you call it as a low level language. And a language which a human being can understand, which is much similar to that of English, you call it as high level language. And if a language possess, or if in a particular language, if you can write the code related to low level language and high level language, then you can call that particular language as a middle level language. So middle level language is wherein a language supports low level language, and then you can also write programs over there in terms of high level language. So using C++, you can design applications, you can design bigger applications, and most of the companies today, even today, makes use of this particular language. Apple company, the biggest company that we have, makes use of applications which are designed with the help of a language called C++. So this particular language is used to design applications like games. You can design games with the help of this. You can design GUI based, graphical user interface based applications. You can design database softwares. You can design operating systems like Apple OS and so on with the help of C++. Along with that, you can also design the browsers. Example of that is Mozilla Firefox and so on. And then you can design advanced computations and graphical applications, followed by you can design banking applications, cloud distributed systems. You can write compilers with the help of this particular language. you can go for designing embedded systems wherein you can design smart watches and all with the help of C++. Apart from that, you can also design enterprise software like the flight simulation softwares and all with the help of C++. C++ also provides lot of libraries for a user to work upon so that you can do high level mathematical computational related applications, as well as you can make use of these libraries for core programming and so on. So these are the various real-time applications that we have when you try to learn or when you learn this particular language called C++. C++, a middle-level language designed and developed by Jarny Stroustrup in the year 1979. You can also call this language as C++ equals to C with the concept of oops. Now let's try to understand over here what is that the concept called oops and why there is a demand for this particular concept. So what is that we need to understand over here is all the new coming languages are based upon the concept of object-oriented programming. So we need to basically understand what is OOPS, why for we need to make use of OOPS and so on. So when you talk about the features of OOPS, basically we say this particular language, when it is designed, keeping in mind that the terminology that should be used should be known to the user and should be known to the user for multiple years. That means the terms that we make use of in our real day-to-day life are being included in this particular language. So whenever you try to learn something and if you know that particular thing much in advance, then it becomes easier for us to learn that particular language. So with that particular concept, what we are trying to understand today is the features of OOPS, wherein we talk about the terms like object, the terms like classes, because these are the terms which we are going to make use of in our in every day in our C++ class. And then when you make use of the terms like classes and the concept of object, then you can perform data hiding, you can perform abstraction, you can go with the concept of inheritance, you can go with the concept of polymorphism, data encapsulation, overloading, and so on. Let's try to understand each one of this in detail. So what exactly you mean by an object? A question that comes. So object is not a new term for us. If I ask a question like what is around us, then each one of us may say, around us we have a computer, a CPU, monitor, keyboard, table, chair, walls, fans, ACs, and so on. So when you talk about an object, we are not discussing here a real-time object, living object, non-living object. So when we say object, it can be any real-world entity which occupies some space. So even the human beings can be considered as an object because we as a human being do occupy some space. So we are going to make use of the term called object in order to remember and classify most of the things which are around us. Now, when you say around us, we have a CPU, around us, we have a monitor, keyboard, table, chair. If you have to remember all this, then we are going to group them. We are going to say monitor, keyboard, CPU comes in one group, and then table and chair, you can put that in another group. That means what? Based on something common among this, you are going to group them, and this group is nothing but a class. So these are the various objects. You can say anything that occupies space is an object. So you can take over here or see that there is an object called table, fan, pen, bike, keyboard, and so on. So these objects do occupy some space, and then each of these object has properties and each of the object has some functionality. So when you talk about an object, it has some properties and it has some functionality. Like for example, if you take a table, the properties of the table are the size of the table, color of the table, height of the table, width of the table can be considered as the properties of the table, and the functionality of the table is can be used as a supporting device for a human being. Similarly, if you take example of a fan or take an example of a keyboard, every object has some properties. The shape, size, color and all can be considered as property, and what that particular object is used for can be considered as the function of that particular object. So now when you say object, it means it has some properties and it has some functions. Put together, the properties and the functions, when you put together and when you give a name for it, you can call it as an object or the name of an object. Like table is the name of an object which has properties, which has functions inside and so on. So when you try to group this object, you can call that particular group as a class. So what is a class? Class is wherein you have collection of objects with something in common. For example, say if I have an object called table, if I have an object called keyboard and a mouse, and if I put them in one group, then you cannot call it as a class. We can call it as a class only when you have group of objects and then all these objects do have something in common. You need to have some properties in common or functionality in common, then only you call it as an object. So when we say a class of C++, meaning of that is we have group of students over there including the faculty, then you call it as a group of objects. But what is common among all this? The common thing among all of us is we are going to learn a particular language called C++. So when you say class, you will have group of objects and there should be something common among these objects. But if a particular student is coming to learn C language and a student is coming to learn C++, the other student is coming to learn Java, if you make them to sit in one class, you cannot call it as a class because they have different they have come to learn different languages, and together when you put them, you cannot call it as a class. So what we require in a class, you need to have collection of objects and all these objects should have something in common. Then you can term it as a class. So you can take over here or see over here a class. A class is a group of objects, and then here you say car can be called as a class. But when you talk about BMW car, you can call it as an object. Audi car, it is an object. Ferrari car, it is an object. But if I just say car or if I just say four-wheeler, I call it as a class. So class, when you talk in general, you can call it as a class. But when you talk in specific, you call it as an object. So when I say four-wheeler, it is a class because four-wheeler, when you say BMW comes in that, Audi comes in that, Ferrari comes in that. But when you talk in specific, like BMW car, you are talking about an object over there. So we should see that there is no confusion between a term and a term called class and object for us. Like if you take a class called car, car has certain properties, car has certain functionality. You can also call it as methods. Now, this class can have objects like Ford car, and then you can have an object of this class called Toyota car, which will have some properties and then functionality and so on. So when you talk in general, it is a class. When you talk in specific, it is an object. So if I use a term student is a general term which I can apply to every one of the student. But if I go with a particular name, Sunil I cannot apply it to everyone. So Sunil is an object and student I can consider it as a class. Similarly, if I say employee is a class, and then XYZ employee is an object. When I say four-wheeler, it is a class, and then when I say Maruti car, it is an object. So likewise, you need to differentiate between a class and an object. Now, if you have to define an object with respect to class, you will say object is one among the class, or you can say object is an instance of object is an instance of the class. So if you have to declare or if you have to define an object with respect to class, you can say object is one among the class or object is an instance of the class. So when you make use of these terms like classes and objects, you get an advantage of data hiding and abstraction. So what exactly we mean by data hiding and what is abstraction? Let's try to understand in detail with an example. So data hiding and abstraction is the concept wherein you have to provide the information required and you have to hide the information which is not required. Let's go with an example. Suppose, say, if you go to buy a refrigerator in the market, okay, and when you go to the shop to purchase a refrigerator, then you will make a deal with the shopkeeper by asking him to show a particular refrigerator of a particular brand and so on. So, when you ask this for a shopkeeper, what the shopkeeper will do is he is going to show you the refrigerator and he is going to talk about the features of that particular refrigerator, saying that the refrigerator has two doors, the deep freeze is at the bottom and not at the top, and the cooling is so fast. And then he will talk about the lights inside, the divisions, partitions inside, and so on. But he will never talk about the devices like the compressor, which is at the back portion of the refrigerator, the thermostat, the condenser, and all that. He will never show by opening the back portion of the refrigerator all these devices. And if you go with the cost of the refrigerator, what we look at, the features is nothing but the fiber body at which we look at is going to cost us only 2000 rupees. And by looking at 2000 rupees or by understanding about this fiber body, we pay the shopkeeper 20,000 rupees without going into much details about the devices like compressor, thermostat, condenser, and so on. Like, because we go by the brand and we trust the brand and we pay him 20,000 rupees. The shopkeeper will not show any kind of interest to talk about these devices and show these devices when we like customer go over there, because the shopkeeper knows we like customer may not have much idea about this particular parts, so he will not talk much about this, but he will only try to show us the features of the refrigerator. So in this way the shopkeeper is trying to hide the information from the user and is trying to provide the information which the user wants. So these kind of programs, intelligent programs, you can write when you talk about this particular concept called data hiding and abstraction. So here you can write a program wherein, suppose say you have designed a program for computer science and mechanical department, and if a faculty member of computer science works with the program, your program should give only the information pertaining to computer science, and if a faculty member of mechanical department works with the program, our program should give information related to mechanical department. But if the principal of the organization or the college works with the program should give the information related to mechanical as well as computer science department. So you can write programs wherein the program is going to give you the output based on the kind of user we are and so on. So that is how you can hide, you can provide the information based on the need, based on the user, and so on. This is where you call the concept as data hiding and abstraction.
So rest of the features related to OOPS we'll try to discuss in our next video. Thank you.